So now I want to dive into the Packers' current unrestricted free agents, and I'm going to give my prediction on who's going to stay and who is going to go. And there's not that many key free agents, I would say, for this season. There's a few, but not honestly as much as times past. But we're going to start off with running back. The only unrestricted free agent is A.J. Dillon. Now, with Aaron Jones coming back in 2024, most likely, Brian Gutekunst sounds very confident he will be back. Jones does have a massive cap hit of $17.6 million. I believe they can restructure his deal to lessen it. And we did see last season Aaron Jones did take a pay cut of about $5 million, so he could do that once again. But I just don't think paying both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones is a smart move. And I don't think A.J. Dillon would, his contract would not be that expensive. It would only be about $4 million per year. That's what PFF predicts. But considering Jones will probably be back, I just don't think paying A.J. Dillon is worth it. I think it's smarter to make a move in the draft. If you look at A.J. Dillon in his time here in Green Bay, he did have a big drop-off this past season at 3.4 yards per attempt, which was his worst in his career in the NFL. Look at his previous 2 years, 4.3 yards per attempt in 2021 and 4.2 yards per attempt in 2022. So I think it's wise. Move on from A.J. Dillon, save money there, draft a running back that could potentially come in and maybe replace Aaron Jones in a few seasons when he potentially leaves in the future. Now, wide receivers, no free agents, which is awesome. The Packers are loaded with young, cheap wide receiver talent, which is going to make them, I think, one of the best in the league for years to come. And considering these guys aren't on, their big contracts yet, most of them on rookie deals. This Packers wide receiver room is going to be dangerous for a few seasons, and we'll see what happens after that because it's going to be tough to keep all these guys because I think lots of them are going to be able to get lots of money in the free agent market, but that's, 3 or 4 years from now, so we don't need to think about that at this point. Now, tight ends, there are 2 unrestricted free agents. First off, we have Josiah DeGuara, who is an unrestricted free agent, and I think that it's smart to move on from Josiah DeGuara. In his 4 seasons in Green Bay, was never really a productive receiver, only 436 receiving yards in his 4 seasons. He did miss a good amount of time with injuries. He did play a lot more as a fullback / H-back role, also a little bit in line and then the slot as well. But I just think that the Packers can find another kind of replacement there, whether that's a super cheap free agent, whether that's Henry Pearson, who played there a little bit when Josiah DeGuara was down a little bit this year. So I think the Packers should move on from DeGuara. He's been okay, but I don't think it's necessary to bring him back. The second unrestricted tight end is Tyler Davis. Missed the entire 2023 season with a knee injury. And while Tyler Davis has shown some promise in the past, I think that because the Packers invested so heavily this past year in both Luke Musgrave in the 2nd round and Tucker Kraft in the 3rd round, I think considering Davis is coming off an ACL injury, it's wiser just to move on from him as well. And potentially, the Packers can maybe add a tight end later in the draft, find some cheap free agents, maybe rely more on Ben Sims, Henry Pearson coming into 2024. So that's my opinion, moving on from those 2 tight ends. Now moving to offensive line, where there are a couple unrestricted free agents. We have Josh Nijman, who got a $4 million tender last season, and considering that, it felt at the time that he would probably be one of the starters. But unfortunately for him, Zach Tom beat him for the right tackle job. And then when David Bakhtiari went down, I would have thought it would have been Nijman to come in at left tackle. But 7th rounder Rasheed Walker, won that job and held that job. And I don't think Josh Nijman is a bad tackle. I think he honestly could probably start on some different teams in the NFL. But considering he was unable to win the job at right tackle or left tackle, and considering the Packers, could see some growth in guys like Sean Ryan, Luke Tenuta, Kadeem Telfort, some of these guys who maybe are a little bit more inexperienced, especially Tenuta, who I think has lots of promise here in Green Bay based on some comments before he got injured in the training camp period from Brian Gutekunst. I think it's wiser. Don't need to pay him. Another team may be willing to pay him similar to last season to be their starter potentially. And so if you have to pay him $4 million again, I don't think it's worth it. I do think that if David Bakhtiari leaves in his release, which I think is probably going to happen in my opinion, but we'll have to see there, that having Nijman could be valuable because he could be that tackle where if there is an injury, he can come in and fill in for maybe it's Rasheed Walker, maybe it's Zach Tom. But I do expect the Packers to at least draft 1 tackle in this upcoming draft, and plus some of those maybe young rising talents who haven't really gotten too much of an opportunity but have been developing behind the scenes, like Tenuta, like Caleb Jones. I think that those guys, we should keep them, maybe see if there can be some growth in that area, and then use some draft capital, but move on from Yosh Nijman. Then we have Jon Runyan Jr., unrestricted free agent. He has been with the Packers since 2020, and he started sharing a lot of time at right guard with Sean Ryan later in the season, maybe midway through the season. And considering that he wasn't the sole starter there at right guard, the Packers were clearly trying to see, do we have something with Sean Ryan? Could he potentially be the future? And considering they kept, fluctuating snaps over and over again, I'm pretty convinced that Jon Runyan will not be back because he is a somewhat solid starter. And similar to where I think Yosh Nijman could be a starter on maybe a team that's weaker at offensive line, I do think that Jon Runyan could be a starting quality guard in the NFL. And if you look at PFF, they project him at making $6.6 million per year. And considering the Packers were willing to go with Sean Ryan a lot this season, flipping between Runyan and Ryan at right guard, I just think that they're going to stick with a cheaper option in Sean Ryan, who's on his rookie deal, closer to $1 million a year, and not be willing to pay a $5 or $6 million number for Jon Runyan Jr. And so that's it for unrestricted free agents at offensive line. Defensive line, 0 unrestricted free agents, which is awesome to see. Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, Jonathan Ford. Lots of those guys are very young, and we should see them continue to develop, but no free agents there. Edge rusher as well, no free agents. We, of course, gave Rashawn Gary that big extension during the season. He would have been a free agent if you wouldn't have given him the extension during the season, and so there's nothing to do at that position. Then inside linebacker, we have 2 unrestricted free agents. We have Eric Wilson, who was a very good, reliable special teamer for the Packers this season, played a little bit of linebacker when there were some injuries there. He led the special teams unit with 11 total tackles, and I think the Packers are going to keep Eric Wilson. I think it's a wise decision. I think that when you have a guy who is pretty reliable on special teams and can also function as a backup inside linebacker, I think bringing him back on a somewhat cheap deal is a smart move. You could probably get him for, $1 to $2 million. Then Christian Welch, another unrestricted free agent at inside linebacker. He was a special teamer, pretty solid this season at 209 snaps. Didn't really play on defense besides maybe one snap. I think the Packers will move on from him. I think that they're going to be able to find some other potential special teamers, and they don't necessarily need Christian Welch. Then moving to cornerback. Here's one of the key areas for free agents is cornerback and safety. The biggest one being Keyshawn Nixon, unrestricted free agent. I think the Packers will keep Keyshawn Nixon. I think just because of the fact that he's an experienced slot corner, you also throw in the fact that he's a back-to-back all-pro kick returner. I think the Packers should bring him back maybe in the $5 to $6 million range. If we look at him in his overall PFF grade this season, it was 61.1, which is 80th at corner in the NFL. But his man coverage grade is much better, 43rd in the NFL. His zone coverage grade, 100th in the NFL. And I think when you look at this Packers secondary, because there's not a lot of depth right now and there's some question marks at corner, we, of course, definitely have Jair. Brian Gutekunst said he will not be traded. Eric Stokes, very questionable if he will ever get back to his full self. He's dealt with so many different injuries the past couple of seasons, and he has not been as great when he has played as he was in his first season as a rookie. So I'm there's some question marks about Stokes. Hopefully he's back next season and will be at his full strength. Carrington Valentine has showed some promise as well. But outside of those guys, you got Zion Gilbert on the roster under contract and Anthony Johnson. And then Corey Ballantyne, also an unrestricted free agent. So I think that while the Packers will probably add at corner, probably a lot in the draft, maybe early in the draft, I'm just not sure they want to rely on let's say a rookie slot corner. I think keeping Keyshawn, who is experienced and who I think is a very physical guy, a guy who can be used from the slot to blitz. And we saw yesterday, breaking down some information, that Jeff Hafley seems to be much more willing than Joe Barry, when you look at Hafley's time in Boston College, to blitz from with his defensive backs. So I think Keyshawn Nixon is going to be a valuable piece on this Packers defense, and they're going to keep him, in my opinion, in 2024. Maybe they draft a slot corner who could fill in for Nixon in the years to come, but right now I think they'll bring Nixon back. Now, Corey Ballantyne, he was a somewhat okay corner, I think, this season. He had his ups and downs, in my opinion, but I think the Packers will replace him. I think they're going to move on from him, draft some more corners in the draft, but if they wanted to keep Ballantyne, he would probably be pretty cheap, so it's a possibility, but my prediction is they move on from Ballantyne. Now, the final position here, we have safety. Another key unrestricted free agent is Darnell Savage. Savage has honestly been a lot better this season when you look at last season. Last year, he was the 87th graded safety in the NFL out of 88. This season, he was the 15th graded safety by PFF in the entire season. And I think that there have been a lot of ups and downs with Savage. Played really well his first year or two, then had a downturn for a couple of years. But I think this past year, he started playing a lot better. He's pretty versatile. You can use him in the slot. You can use him in the box. He played 147 snaps in the box, 429 snaps at free safety, and 109 snaps in the slot. The only thing that I worry about with him is he's a very bad tackler. If you look at this season, he's 87th among safeties when it comes to missed tackle percentage at 17.3%. His career missed tackle percentage is 17.4%. He plays tough and physical. He just misses a ton of tackles. PFF predicts him as about $5 million per year, and I think that's a smart move to bring him back. You don't have too much depth at safety here at all. Under contract currently, you got Anthony Johnson Jr., Benny Sapp III, Zane Anderson, and Tyler Coyle. So there's no doubt safety, big position of need. I think the Packers could use some of their first picks in the first 2 rounds on a safety, but I think that you want to have someone who at least has experience, who's a veteran, who has potential and can play well when they're playing at their best. And so I think the Packers will keep Darnell Savage in this next season. Next one, we have Rudy Ford, also unrestricted. He honestly played really well when he was healthy, played 626 snaps at safety this season. He was PFF's 33rd graded safety, and he was a much better tackler this year than Darnell Savage. He only had an 8.1% missed tackle percentage, which was a lot better, almost double as good as Darnell Savage. That was 16th in the NFL. Unfortunately for him, he is getting a little bit up there in age, 29. He may still have a few good years left before he's in his young 30s, which can be a time where guys start to decline at corner, safety, things like that. But because I think they will bring back Savage, I don't think they're going to bring back Ford as well. I think that they're going to potentially add a free agent at safety, and they could as well add a lot of safeties, which I think will happen in the draft, at least one. And then the final free agent here is Jonathan Owens, who played a ton of snaps for the Packers, around 900 or so. He was PFF's 73rd graded safety. He wasn't great. I think the Packers can improve there with a free agent or a drafted player in 2024, and so I think they're going to move on from Jonathan Owens. And when we look at special teams, there are no unrestricted free agents. Daniel Whalen is an exclusive rights free agent, so the Packers should keep him at punter. Was pretty solid this season. So that is pretty much it for my free agent predictions. If you'd like more Packers content like this, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.